Hello chess friends, and welcome to Zaro's chess channel, and welcome to the round 11 of the Sinquefield Cup in 2019. So I haven't followed this tournament too much. I was on vacation. I followed this game a little bit, and I think we had many draws. It wasn't maybe one of the best tournaments this year. I think we had better tournaments, but we had also a great tournament by Ding Liren. He was on the first place before this last round. He had half of the point more than Magnus Carlsen. So in the last round, Ding Liren only drew against Shakrik Mamedjadov, so it was now Magnus Carlsen's turn. He had to win the game against Maxime Vachier Lagrave with the black pieces, so tough thing to handle, and really he had to win the game in order to get the chance in the tie breaks and to try to win this very nice tournament. So let's see what happened in the game. We had e4 by Maxime Vachier Lagrave, c5 by Carlsen, knight on f3, and we have knight on c6. This is now this old Sicilian setup. After bishop on b5 we have the Neshmedinov attack, and this Neshmedinov attack is very often played now these days, and Magnus Carlsen played in the game against Caruana the move e6, and that went wrong, I think, in the game against Caruana. He played now his main style here with g6, going into Dragon Sicilian setup, waiting here a little bit. White, of course, white will take and go into a positional game, try to double up pawns. Here bishop on c6 was played, and b takes on c6. Magnus in the last games always played d takes c6 with these possibilities of this counter attack on d4. So here he played b takes c6, going into a more dynamic game, because from black's perspective we can also try sometimes a pawn breakthrough with d5, but it has to be prepared. You cannot rush into anything in these types of positions. So here d4 was played by Maxime Vachier Lagrave, and now c takes d4, queen takes on d4. And what Magnus accomplished here, although of course it comes now with the tempo that he has undoubled his pawns, it will be very important in the continuation of the game. If you try something like knight on f6, then e5 is of course the move. Then after knight on d5, then we have c4, which is, I think, a very unpleasant thing. Of course you can play knight on b4 with the preparation with the fork, but now after knight on d1, this knight would be out of game, maybe with some moves a3 and then b4. White will have a huge space control on the queen side, so that's why Magnus went into this f6 line. And although you're weakening a little bit your like squares, the problem from white's perspective is that white doesn't have any more the like square bishop, so here he cannot play bishop on c4 and similar ideas. So after d6 we can use this bishop as the main protector, so it's a very good thing to have this light square bishop now, so we can play on dark squares with our own pawns, because we have a very nice protector. So castling now d6 as mentioned, and now c4. So one of the ideas while playing against the bishop pair, of course, is to build fortresses on light squares. So that's why here Maxime Vachier Lagrave will try to get all of his pawns on light squares in order to battle against this light square bishop. And here we have c5 by Carlsen. Queen on d5 doesn't bring you so much, because rook on b8, and then after knight on c3 we have simple bishop on b7, and the position is much more simplified. So that's why queen on d3 was played by Maxime Vachier Lagrave, and now bishop on g7, b3, and f5 is also not so dangerous, although you're opening this diagonal. But now simple e5 is perfectly fine. After d takes e5, queen takes king takes on d8, and now bishop on b2. We can grab this pawn now in the next move, king on e8, and now bishop on e5, bishop takes, knight takes, and after maybe knight on f6 we can cement the knight. And here Magnus Carlsen will continue the game with the backward pawn, which is of course not good. Basically the only piece with which you can challenge this knight on knight on e5 would be the move knight on d7, but it's still dangerous because after rook on e1 we can again cement another piece on this very important square. So that's why knight on h6 was played by Magnus Carlsen, going into a more calm line. Knight on c3 and now rook on b8. We have bishop on d2. Maybe better idea is bishop on b2, because we would then go and try into favorable trades of bishops here. Then Magnus Carlsen would have some weaknesses around the king if he castles, of course, because this bishop, although it's also an attacking piece, but it's also a good defensive piece around black's king. And here that knight on d2 was played, as I mentioned. So here castling played by Carlsen, and here rook on e1. Knight on f7, we have h4, which is a very dangerous attack, because going into attacks with the bishop pair, but I simply cannot find a better plan here for white. Here of course you want to play h5 and force this g5 move. Then this bishop on g7 would be a weak one, because then this bishop would be really blocked out by its own pawns, which is not good, of course. But still Magnus has some possibilities, even if g5 would have been played. Then after h6 cementing this pawn first on g5 and then try some f5 pawn breakthroughs. So it's still possible. And here rook on b7 was played by Magnus Carlsen. This is really a great move. It wasn't even suggested by engines as I analyzed this game, so it's really human move, but it comes with this idea: if the position gets open somehow, we would then have a flexible rook which can play, of course, on the 7th rank. Then of course we can double up rooks here on the f file, and this will be very important in the continuation of the game, because here h5 you have to play g5 here, because if you allow your opponent to take here on g6, then this g6 pawn would still be a weakness, and it will be vulnerable to attacks here by knight on h4. So that's why you have to play g5, and you see now Magnus Carlsen's bishop is not a good one. Knight on h2 was played, and here knight on e5. This knight on h2 was now the first mistake by Maxime Vachier Lagrave. I think he should have gone maybe knight on e2 with the preparation to play maybe knight on g3, and then try an outpost here of this knight on f5. Then this bishop would be really bad after potential d takes f5, e takes f5, pardon me, because then it's basically impossible to get this bishop somehow into the game. Of course we can prevent these ideas with e6, but when you play e6, then you weaken your d6 pawn. So as mentioned here, Maxime Vachier Lagrave went into this knight on h2 idea, of course with the preparation maybe to try now to play first the move g4 and then knight on e2, knight on g3, and then knight on f5. But it was a little bit too slow, because now Magnus Carlsen gets a decisive tempo, knight on e5, and also preventing this g4 ideas. Here queen on g3 was played, and now rook, king on h8. And this king on h8 is also very powerful by Magnus. He's trying now to get this rook on the g file. f4 was played, and of course g takes f4, bishop takes on f4. The problem also is that you cannot bring the bishop on h6, which would be very good now in this position for Magnus. That's why he has to play first slowly, rook on g8, and then try maybe queen on f8, and then try to get rid of this annoying bishop on f4, because this bishop is very powerful. And then we will continue the game with a very powerful like square bishop. So rook on e3 was played. If you try something like bishop on e5, it's not a problem. We have f takes e5. You see rook on f7 is not possible, because then we'll lock the rook here, and in the next move we can capture the rook. So this occupying of the 7th rank is not possible so far. That's why rook on e3 was played, and now knight on c6. Here Magnus has already a slightly advantage in the position, and with the black pieces, of course, it's perfectly fine. Queen on f2, and now f5. Now Magnus is finally trying to open up the position for these bishops, but maybe a better idea would have been still this queen on f8 with the preparation, maybe queen on h6. This f5 can be met. Of course, we can also simply take, and then again this e7 would be a weakness. Still, we have possibilities to place the knight on this very active square on d5, and after f5 here Maxime Vachier Lagrave makes this decisive mistake. He plays knight on f3, and here we have a forced tactical sequence. Bishop takes on c3, rook takes on c3, and now e5. If you try something like bishop on g3, then you get f4. If you try bishop on h4, then queen on f8 is again very dangerous. After rook on d3, here rook on g7 is very powerful. You see how useful now this rook from this b file can really come here and participate in the attack. If you try something like bishop on h2, then again f4, locking the bishop. The bishop is now out of game. After king on h1, we can play again rook on g7, and now queen on h4, and now again this queen on f8 idea. If you try something like rook on f2 in order to defend this g2 pawn, then rook after knight on d4, knight takes on d4, c takes d4, rook on f3. You see, you can even lose the queen in such positions. So very dangerous stuff. So that's why here rook on d3 was played by Maxime Vachier Lagrave. He sacrificed now the bishop. I don't know if he saw all of this, but here Magnus simply took the bishop, and here we have queen on b2. It's the evaluation is winning here for black. This was probably a mistake by Maxime Vachier Lagrave. If you tried, he could have gone maybe into this line. If he tries, if he tried here maybe after this move e5, bishop on g5, but then we simply trade off here and go again into a favorable endgame, still with the possibilities to place our knight on this very active square on d4 with the preparation rook on g7, and of course with the support of this bishop, this would be a very powerful attack. So here Maxime Vachier Lagrave lost a piece. Now queen on b2, as mentioned, rook on g7, and now h6 was played, and now we have f takes e4 by Magnus Carlsen. If you take h takes g7 first, then of course rook takes on g7, and if you move the rook, then we have queen on e7. It's very powerful. You have to move the knight somewhere, but you don't have good squares, because there are now some threats even to push the pawn here on f3. So it's a perfect coordination of pieces. Now if you try rook on e2 in order to pin here, then bishop on g4, you see you lose the knight eventually. Here after h3, you can even play e3, which now prepares now this very nice outpost of the knight on e5. After b4, knight on e5, knight takes, and here we have d takes e5. You have to get back with your rook. You see we have again possibilities to play the move here f3. This is very dangerous, and we can also try, if this rook moves, some e4 and then f3 ideas. These three connected pawns in the center are really dangerous, so this is again not a favorable continuation here for white. If you try then here in this position to take this pawn, then we can simply take the pawn with the queen, and if you try rook on d1, we can simply take, which is not a problem. If you try rook on d5, then queen on e7 can be played. Now after rook on e5, we can play queen on f8. After maybe a try of the pin, it's not a problem. We can play simple bishop on c4 here, and rook takes, queen takes. After queen on b8, we can play bishop on g8. So as mentioned, this is now completely winning, so that's why here Maxime Vachier Lagrave allowed here to take the knight. Here we have now finally again this move h takes g7, and now rook takes on g7, rook takes on f3. But now the queen comes very actively into the game. Now we have some threats on this very weak g2 pawn. This is now our main target. These rooks cannot go into the game because we have some threats, of course. Also knight on knight on e5 is again very dangerous. So rook on f2 was played. Maxime Vachier Lagrave is trying to defend now, and now knight on d4, very powerful. Rook takes on f4. We have bishop takes on f5, bishop on f5, closing the position for these rooks. If these rooks come somehow into the game, because there were some checkmate threats even here on f8. b4 was played, and here white is trying simply to open the position now for the queen, somehow getting at least some perpetual checks or similar stuff. But now bishop on e6, here rook on f8 was played, but now bishop on g8, it's not a problem. B takes c5, we have d takes c5. Still we're continuing the game with this very well placed knight on d4. We have queen on b8, queen on e3, queen on d6, and now Magnus tries to get this knight somehow into the game. The idea is to bring somehow the knight on e2 and get a very effective check here, combined with this rook and this knight. This is now very dangerous attack. King on h2, and now queen on g5. If the queen moves, of course, from this diagonal, then we have some queen on g3 ideas. That's why queen on d5, queen on h4, again with the check. King on g1 has to be played. Queen on e7, we have queen on h5, and now queen on e3. Very powerful. Again, if the queen moves, then we have also some knight on e2 or even a knight on f3 possibilities. Here queen on h2, and now knight on e2. As mentioned, this is now the main move that Magnus Carlsen has prepared here. Now the king has to move with on a weird square here, of course, because we don't want to bring the king here on the dark square, because combined with this queen, maybe queen on e5 and then knight on g3 would be very dangerous. So that's why queen on c1 here, rook on f1, and now knight on g3. If you try something like queen on g3, then of course we take first with a check, and then we would have again a completely winning endgame here. So that's why king on g1 was played, and now queen on e3, and in this position Maxime Vachier Lagrave resigned, because he has to move the king, and we can simply take here in the next move this rook, and again we would have a completely winning position. Okay, great game I think by Magnus Carlsen. He played this very aggressive f5. Maxime Vachier Lagrave didn't handle that very well. Okay, and he had some better chances, but he really made decisive mistakes. Magnus Carlsen made none, and that's why he deserved really this win. We'll see what happened in the continuation of this tournament, because now we have a weird situation. Ding Liren and Magnus Carlsen have the same points. They have also the same additional criteria, so they will play some rapid and blitz games for the first place. I'm really looking forward to it, because we'll have the clash of the titans. Ding Liren really in top form in the last weeks, and I think we will have many great games. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this game, and you can also watch my today's videos. I've created some video about some open positions in my basics in chess series. You can watch this video if you want to improve your strategical skills in the chess game, and you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Thanks you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.